Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Last few weeks between the two black and yellow shows have been kind of interesting because, for Christmas, AEW was off, NXT did a pre-recorded show, then the following week, AEW had a brand new show, and NXT had a best of, so kind of a confusing time, so I didn't do Wednesday Warfare the last couple of weeks. I will say, though, that last week's AEW was really strong work by them. It was probably one of the better episodes of Dynamite they've had in the entire run they've been around. Will they keep that momentum going this week? Let's find out. Beginning with NXT, though, we have the new women's champion, Rhea Ripley, in the ring. She doesn't get too far in her promo, though, before she's cut off by Toni Storm, who beat her last year for the NXT UK Women's Championship, as a matter of fact. Toni says that not only is she going to beat Kaylee Ray Sunday at TakeOver Blackpool 2 for the Women's Championship there, she's going to beat Rhea at Worlds Collide for the Women's Championship, the NXT regular. So Rhea accepts her challenge. Then we get the promo parade, which no matter who's doing it, no matter what show it is, I always hate this whole trope. So you've got Kaylee Ray coming out, Io Shirai, you've got Bianca Belair, Candice LeRae, everyone says some stuff, and Rhea finally says, enough's enough. If you want to fight, I want to fight too. So she decks Bianca, and we has 6-woman tag. That matches Rhea Ripley, Toni Storm, and Candice LeRae versus Kaylee Ray, Io Shirai, and Bianca Belair, aka 5 faces and 1 heel. My sample size of what I've seen of Kaylee Ray's stuff is admittedly kind of limited, but from what I have seen of hers, I can tell she does a better job actually playing a heel and getting heel responses than the other 2 women on her team, Io and Bianca, who even though they're on the heel spectrum, they still get largely babyface reactions because of their characters and what they do in the ring, as we even saw in the promo parade just before this. It's an okay match, nothing too crazy. It ends when Io is in the ring and wants to do a moonsault, but Bianca tags herself in. Shirai decks her own partner, and in the confusion, Ripley takes Bianca out with the Riptide to win. Then afterward, her team celebrates. Candice is holding the NXT Women's Championship. Like you do, like you look at the belt when it's not yours. She has that kind of look for it. So seems to be setting up that maybe Candice is the next challenger for Rhea. Face versus face for the title does sound kind of interesting. We'll see where it goes. At that time will tell. We get one of 2 Tommaso Ciampa promo packages on the night. And his first, when he talks about how hard it was to relinquish the championship he never lost due to his neck injury. He says that Adam Cole, is basically living a lie because he's holding the championship he never lost. He wants his life back, his life in this case being the championship. And we'll hear more from him later in the night. It's that time of year for the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. First round began this week with a couple of matches. The first one on the night saw the Forgotten Sons, who made it into last year's finals of the tournament, taking on Eichner and Bartel of Imperium. It's a relatively short match in the grand scheme of things, but they managed to fit a lot of stuff in there. Eichner at one point, he's got a protective face mask. That falls off halfway through. He just keeps on going. They see a few attempts at them trying the European Bomb, but Forgotten Sons keep getting out of it. Eventually, they hit the European Bomb after the 3rd attempt, I believe, and they finally win. It was actually a really good match. Despite it being short, it was pretty jam-packed with entertainment. Probably my favorite Forgotten Sons match since I started reviewing NXT. We had a pretty funny promo from Matt Riddle backstage explaining how he and his team with Pete Dunne for the Dusty Classic was formed. He said, basically, we made faces at each other, and now we're the Broserweights. Pretty brilliant stuff. Our next match sees Austin Theory, who is the youngest champion in Evolve history, taking on Joaquin Wilde, the former DJZ, and it was part of the Breakout tournament last year. It's a pretty busy match, just flippy guys doing flippy things, very fast-paced cruiserweight kind of style. Theory beats Wilde with a version of the TKO. Between this and his match on the Christmas episode against Roderick Strong, I think Theory's been looking pretty good so far, and they keep hammering this point home how young he is at 22 years of age, and it is very impressive, honestly. So there seem to be having some building blocks in place for Theory to do well, and his first couple of appearances at NXT, not bad. So during the night, we got these quick promos from each of the 4 guys in the main event. Damien Priest comes up here. The other 3 aren't really worth talking about because this one is especially bad just for how wooden and inorganic Damien's delivery is. Either he needs more acting classes or the guy who wrote his promo needs more writing classes because it was just, the whole thing was bad. As the sexy ladies are putting on his vest, Priest's delivery is just, it's really, really bad here. It took me out of it. Oh, this man is an actor, and he's doing a very bad job at that. Sorry, that's how I felt about that one. Our next match is the next Dusty Classic Round 1. It's actually being billed as a dream match. Tag champs versus tag champs as Fish and O'Reilly, the Undisputed Era, take on Wolfgang and Mark Coffey of Gallus, the NXT UK tag Tag Team Champions. Something I noticed earlier in the show that really stuck out to me here was just how dead the crowd was. I don't know if they all went on a big field trip to Wrestle Kingdom this past weekend and brought the Japanese customs with them back here in this show, because God, it was a good match. There was a lot of exciting stuff happening, and the crowd was just crickets for the bulk of it. It was really, that also took me out of it as well. It's like, man, how dead this crowd is. Ultimately, Adam Cole gets a big kick in on Wolfgang's head, allowing for Fish and O'Reilly to hit the high-low and to win the matchup. For a dream match, kind of disappointed we had this interference, constant interference from Strong and Cole on the outside. I would hope to see more, a better match from these two teams down the line, hopefully with no interference. But yeah, it's just a shame that the audience wasn't there for it. Johnny Gargano cutting a promo in the ring on Finn Balor up next. He talks about how in 2016, you got out of NXT as fast as you could to get called up, whereas Johnny, he says, I got called up in August, but I said no, I wanted to stay at NXT because I love it so much. He also takes a shot at the Extraordinary Man nickname he had when he was on the main roster. Out comes Finn Balor and goes, that's a nice promo there, Johnny. That's a nice promo. I use insider terms now. That's my gimmick. And he also says he should be called Johnny Promo because all the doctors will clear him for. He makes a challenge to Johnny for a match at TakeOver Portland if he can make it that far. So the Portland fans should get a nice treat with that matchup, but I am just really over Finn's whole wink wink, nudge, insider term shtick, I read the dirt sheets, that whole thing, that, to me, I'm just kind of over it. They announced Kushida's mystery partner for the Dusty Classic, and it's Alex Shelley. They are reuniting the Time Splitters for this tournament. I'm really excited about that. Shelley's worked in wrestling for a very long time, primarily like TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan, and now he's finally getting a shot in WWE, which is really cool, even if it's just this, one and done with NXT and the Dusty Classic. Still really cool to see them reunite the Time Splitters here. They're going to be taking on the Grizzled Young Vets next week, and I'm really looking forward to that match. Up next, Mia Yim taking on Caden Carter. It's a face versus face match here. Lots of sportsmanship here in this one. Pretty short and sweet matchup with Caden actually getting most of the offense in. Ultimately, she jumps off the second rope and eats a Protect Yo neck from out of nowhere, so Mia Yim wins the matchup. More sportsmanship. Then all of a sudden, Chelsea Green jumps them and dumps Carter out of the ring. She's joined on the ramp by Robert Stone, formerly Robbie E on Impact. He announces Green as his charge, I should say, so he's gonna be a manager there. It's cool to see Green making her kind of like re-debut with this new wrinkle being added to her working with Robert Stone here. It's cool to see more managers, I always say, in the WWE umbrella. But man, what the hell is keeping them from putting Malcolm Bivens on TV? Put him out there already. He can't just be lingering on Twitter forever. We get our second Tommaso Ciampa promo. He takes more shots at Adam Cole. He says he wants his championship back. He's even holding on to those nameplates for safekeeping. We then go to our main event. Number one contender, fatal four-way for the North American Championship. Keith Lee, Dominic Dijakovic, Cameron Grimes, and Damian Priest. The crowd finally awakens for this matchup, in particular for the stuff Keith Lee does, because he is all over the place. I mean, all four guys do a really good job of this matchup, but Keith Lee in particular is really awesome here. My favorite part of the match is when he catches Damian in midair and like swings him around to hit the other two guys. That is just incredible stuff. We get yet another shot in which Keith Lee just ascends into the shot as two other guys are fighting. That seems to be the real Keith Lee trope now. They really want to make that a recurring gif, it seems, for Lee here. So he hits Grimes with a Spirit Bomb to win, and so then he faces Roderick Strong for the North American Championship in 2 weeks. Great way to end the show. Really strong main event. AEW begins with Hangman Page and Kenny Omega taking on Private Party. Will these two members of the Elite be able to set aside their differences and their tension for this matchup? Before we find out, though, we see a four-man commentary team for this particular match because it's part of their whole tribute to Memphis they've been hyping all week. Dave Brown, longtime Memphis wrestling commentator, also a longtime meteorologist in the market, joins JR, Tony, and Excalibur just for this matchup, though. It's a great opener. So much fun to watch, especially from Private Party. If I have one nitpick about their shtick, I'd have to say I don't like Isaiah Cassidy doing the shriek cell like every time he gets hit. That was very excessive almost in this match. But again, kind of a nitpick. We do see some miscommunication between Page and Omega in this matchup here, but they're able to overcome the malfunctions at the junction, as Morwin might say. And ultimately, Kenny hits we actually get kind of a V-trigger buckshot combo in the middle of the ring, which is pretty impressive. One Winged Angel onto Mark Quinn for the win. Then afterward, though, we see Pac on the big screen putting Michael Nakazawa in the brutalizer as the referees try and pull him off, and he demands that Kenny give him the rubber match, give him one more singles match up here, or more pain will be on the way. And that's how that segment ends. But yeah, a great opener. Rio defends the AEW Women's title against Chris Statlander, who became the #1 contender a few weeks back. Brandy Rhodes is on commentary for this matchup here, and it's actually good work between these two ladies. I think they work really well together. A few minutes in, though, Awesome Kong and Melanie Cruz, who's now just called Mel, of the Nightmare Collective, they make their way down the ramp. When the referee's not looking, Cruz beats up Rio for a bit, but then Chris dives onto both Mel and Awesome Kong. Brandy leaves the commentary desk and confronts Chris, and when Chris's back is turned, we see a guy come out from under the ring. He's the bald guy we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks in the Brandy promos. It's Dr. Luther, which Excalibur's quick to point out, and I'll get more about him in a minute, but basically he's there. He gives the assist to allow Kong to hit Chris, and then Rio dives onto Luther to the outside, and so there's more. Basically, Rio and Chris go back to wrestling in spite of all the interference on the outside, and we had a lot of close calls here, but then all of a sudden the Collective interfere yet again. They help Rio win the matchup, and so Rio retains, and they're both pretty upset about this. Like, this is not the way Rio wanted to win the matchup. And then afterward, Kong beats down Chris. Rio tries to fight her, but then Mel beats up Rio. Then out come like Big Swole and Hikaru Shida, who's sitting at ringside, and Sonny Kiss. They all come out to help the baby faces, and then that's how the segment ends. Okay, lots to unpack with this segment. First and foremost, I have to say it's awesome to see Dr. Luther on AEW. I've mentioned this before in other videos, that Luther was, first of all, he's a longtime wrestler, mostly in Canada and Japan. He's a longtime friend of Chris Jericho's too, and also he was the booker for Portland Wrestling when I was starting out, so he was one of the first people to give me a chance. So on a personal and professional level, I am over the moon and overjoyed to see Luther finally getting this like mainstream TV opportunity here with AEW. However, I think his debut was a little bit clunky for a couple of reasons. I think if they were going to have this thing where the Collective interfere in the match, then they should have done their thing, and that's how the match ends. Either it ends in a DQ or a schmaz, or the first thing they do to interfere ends up ending the match, because you had this whole thing where, oh, they got, like, Luther had made the first impact holding Chris Statlander in place to allow Kong to hit her, then he's immediately punked out by Rio diving onto him, and then they just keep wrestling for a while, and then they go away after the post-match beatdown. Like, it was this really weird order of that. Also, you know, we've said this before about how AEW doing these cold debuts with people, and they always kind of fall flat. I think part of that has to do with the commentary. I think, you know, the fact that, you know, between the Dark Order, Butcher and the Blade, and now Dr. Luther, the first thing Excalibur does, oh, this is who that person is. As if, like, you know, I would much rather, instead of just being told, here's the name of this person that you should know about, and, you know, in my case, I do know who it is, but many people might not. So, in this case, I would like to see someone go like, oh, who is this person? And then next week, we get an explanation. Leave us some mystery. Leave us hanging for a bit. So when Luther comes out, or when the Dark Order, or when whoever shows up, and they do a beatdown, say, wow, who's this person? I don't know who this person is. Then next week, you've got some details about it. That I think would make the drama and the intrigue of these kind of cold debuts be a little bit better. And, you know, besides all the interference, I actually really enjoyed this matchup. Like I said, I think they worked well together. And then when they got back to wrestling after the Collective interfered, I was very engaged. I'm like, oh my God, maybe there will be a title change here. Lots of close calls and false finishes in that last part of the matchup before the Collective interfere again. So the match itself was fine, notwithstanding the interference, but just the Collective, the structure of that match, the Collective doing their thing, that's what took a bit away from me. We got a Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford hype package, and it ends with the footage of last week's show where Penelope hits Joey Janelle from behind with a low blow. So are they going to work together in an angle or not? Because all I've been hearing ever since I first brought it up at All Out was, oh, Janelle doesn't want to do a storyline with Penelope Ford because they used to date, whatever. But now it seems they're really going to go that way, so is it happening or is it not? Christopher Daniels taking on Sammy Guevara in this old guard versus new blood kind of matchup. Last week, Guevara, you know, called out Daniels, said he was over the hill, which prompts this matchup here. I enjoyed this one. Both guys look pretty good. Daniels makes his comeback, and as he's doing that, Pentagon Jr. on stage, he has the mic, and he's kind of he's taunting Daniels for a bit. Guevara capitalizes on the distraction and wins the matchup. Then after the match, the Dark Order show up. Evil Uno's dressed like a college student at his first job interview, and he offers Daniels a spot in the Order. Daniels thinks about it for a moment. He tosses the mask back at Evil Uno's face. The rest of the Order descend upon him. Out come the rest of SCU and the Young Bucks. Bucks to make the save, and they all start beating down the underlings for a bit, capping off with a Chris Daniels BME on John Silver. He still got it. So, while the Nightmare Collective, to me, still a work in progress, the more I'm watching the Dark Order, I'm more open-minded about them and seeing where they're going to go with this. Like, also the fact they, the faces finally got some revenge on the Dark Order after that beatdown a couple of weeks ago. I think it's nice to see. So we'll see where this is going. I'm still, like I said, a lot of people have kind of tuned out the Dark Order. They've kind of dismissed them. I'm still kind of like, well, let's just see where this is going. It's brothers versus brothers as the Brotherhood, Cody and Dustin Rhodes, take on the Lucha Brothers. It's a bit of a theme here. This is a good match. I really enjoyed the work between all four of these guys. At one point, Rey Fenix grabs a chair, and Arn Anderson, who's Cody's or the Nightmare Family's coach, kicks it out of Rey's hands. Dustin hitting a Canadian Destroyer and the Final Reckoning onto Rey to win the matchup. Then after the match, Tony Schiavone gets in the ring to interview Cody about what MJF said last week, the fact that MJF's putting this big hurdle in front of Cody in order for him to wrestle MJF at Revolution, have to face Wardlow in a cage, basically. And so before Cody can answer, Arn Anderson cuts him off and tells Tony, we're going to talk about it this week and get back to you next time. You didn't talk about it all last week when he made the challenge? Then backstage, Alex Marvez is with Lanny Poffo, who is there to pay tribute to his brother Randy Savage and his dad Angelo Poffo as part of the whole Memphis tribute thing. But apparently it happened during AEW Dark, so the thing they spent all this week hyping up, you won't actually get to see until next week on Dark. So that seems kind of misleading. If you're going to do that, might as well actually do it on Dynamite, or at least have it in two parts. The most we got of the Memphis thing this week was Dave Brown on commentary in the opener, and this brief appearance by Lanny Poffo putting over AEW, and that was it. If you actually had people tuning into AEW for the Memphis tribute and they didn't get it this week, I'd be pretty pissed if I were them. MJF's out next to cut a promo. Some Blue Meanie pointed out on Twitter tonight, it's a good point, why'd they put the MJF segment and the Cody segment back to back? Are you telling me these guys didn't cross paths backstage on their way in and out of the ring area? Anyway, MJF calls out Cody to appear. He was just there, so that makes sense, but he doesn't show up, but DDP does. Diamond Dallas Page arrives in the ring, gets a big yoga chant going from the audience. As he's cutting his promo, MJF's on his phone, not paying attention, and DDP brings up the question, is DDP gonna wrestle one more match? And then MJF cuts him off and brings out the Butcher and the Blade and the Bunny and the Blade and the Bunny and the Butcher and the Blade. MJF then makes a crack about DDP's daughters, which prompts Page to put his hands on MJF. Then he drops the Butcher and the Blade and the Blade and the Butcher and the Blade with diamond cutters, and then MJF takes DDP to Dick Kick City. Out come QT Marshall and Dustin Rhodes to make the save, kind of an odd pairing. Then MJF and Wardlow powder out. So we're going to get that match next week, actually. MJF, Butcher and Blade versus DDP, QT Marshall, and Dustin Rhodes. It's universe mode, baby. I love DDP. I love his stuff, but I don't know if I want to see DDP in a match ever again. So, but if there's one time he's going to make a comeback, it might as well be at a Bash the Beach show. Six-man tag match up next as the Jurassic Express take on Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends. Marco Stunt gets lots of love here from the crowd. He is the hometown boy, and Orange Cassidy gets one of the biggest pops of the night when he makes his way into the ring and works his magic with Luchasaurus. Marco Stunt gets a lot of time to shine as well here in this thing. Jungle Boy rolls up Chuck Taylor to win the match, so he gets his first pinfall victory in AEW, which is a great follow-up to what happened with his match a couple weeks ago against Jericho, the time limit draw, looking very strong. So here he comes out and he actually wins decisively, so hopefully big things are on the horizon for Jungle Boy. And speaking of Jericho, the final segment of the night has Jericho waiting for Moxley's decision. Will Jon Moxley join the Inner Circle? Last week, Jericho sweetened the deal by offering Moxley 49% stake in the Inner Circle LLC, as well as a fancy sports car. During the commercial break, Guevara's cue card gimmick, which is gold, where he goes, "Not since the moon landing, Elvis in Hawaii, and Who Shot Mr. Burns? Has there been so much anticipation?" So Moxley comes out, and so the question is, will he join? John says he can't be bought, but nevertheless, he says yes, he will join the group. So he takes off his jacket to reveal the Inner Circle t-shirt. They pop open the bubbly. The announcers are stunned by this revelation, and they keep on celebrating. Jericho finally gives Moxley the keys to the Ford GT, and then Moxley goes, "Oh, I was just kidding. I want your championship." Bashes him in the head with a bottle of bubbly, hits a couple of paradigm shifts, then he scampers on through the crowd, takes off the Inner Circle t-shirt. Great visual of Jake Hager holding a passed out Chris Jericho, cradling him in his arms as we fade to black. How fitting that on an episode featuring Diamond Dallas Page that we get this homage to the night that DDP almost joined the NWO but said, psych, he's WCW through and through. So it was a pretty entertaining segment. I think that they did a good job over the last few weeks building up the anticipation for this. And I didn't get to review the show last week, but one thing I said on Twitter about Jericho offering all those other things is that it made it more of like, wow, will Moxley actually join? Because before it was just like, I want you to join the group. There was nothing there besides that. It was very obvious Moxley wasn't going to join. It still was obvious that Moxley wasn't going to join after Jericho sweetened the deal, but it made it more enticing just from a kayfabe perspective. Like he actually added stakes to that. So I was glad they did that last week. And so him, Moxley kind of outsmarting Jericho, getting the keys, then turning on Jericho, I thought was a really entertaining move. And so it just adds more fuel to the fire for their match for the title at Revolution. But yeah, great way to end the show. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. This week my choice is Dynamite. I think, that show was not perfect. There were a couple of things that I questioned, most notably the whole debut of Dr. Luther and the whole clunkiness of his appearance there and how it interfered with the Riho Chris Statlander match. But what I see about AEW that I didn't really get with NXT this week was just the variety of the characters, the diversity and the freedom of the promos, the quality of the promos were better than in NXT. I think the matches were more exciting and felt different and just more varied in style. When I watch NXT, by and large, I see the product of what happens when everyone goes to the same performance center and learns from the same teachers. You do see some variations with the UK guys and the Evolve guys a little bit, and the indie guys who get a bit of a fine-tuning in the performance center before they get on TV. But for the most part, to me, a lot of it just feels like really samey, and that's kind of what I got from this week. I don't think there was enough breakout moments and oh my god, these these wow moments in NXT this week for me to really hook me. Whereas with AEW, like I said, not a perfect show, but I just like the fact that everything feels different. Every match feels different from the next. Every promo feels different from the next. There's always something different going on. The variety is what I really enjoy, and so that's going to be an uphill battle for NXT as far as I'm concerned. When the hell's Velveteen Dream coming back from injury? Because when he's there, the variety and the quality of the different characters and the diversity goes way up in NXT just by his presence alone. So I really hope he comes back very soon. But yeah, that's how I felt about the show this week. I think AEW delivered a much more entertaining show to me. But let me know what you thought about NXT and AEW this week in the comments section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.